So I love the sea, I always did. And as a kid, when I was growing up, I joined the CLB, which was the Church Lads Brigade, sponsored by the Anglican Church. And I was in the Naval Cadets. And lived by the sea. And of course, when I used to go fishing with my dad, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were brought up in a large family, and there wasn't much work. You know, it's almost the same like a recession as it is now, although we pulled through the 1930s. But when the war broke out in 1939, and we seen all the ships coming in to St. John's, and the American bases being built, and you know, boy, this is great, you know, as everything was getting exciting. And I thought, well, this is going to be great, and if I can join the Royal Navy. So I went down to try to join the Royal Navy, but I was too young, so they chased me away. So I told him, he told me to come back next year when I said I was 17. And of course, I said to him, you want to see me back here next year, because I'll be going to, I suppose, in a stowaway. I want to get away and see some action, you know, and full of life and want to see adventure. So one morning around 2 o'clock we went out fishing in 1940, and we were coming in from the fishing grounds, and there were a lot of ships in the harbour, Norwegian, Dutch and British and Polish and so on. And of course when this chief steward, I think, on this Norwegian ship, he sort of called us over to the ship, and I said to my dad, I said, one of the crew members wants to get a lift ashore, you know, so we go over. And of course, when we went over, it was the chief steward, and he wanted to purchase some fish from us. So while my dad was doing business, I went back aft and got talking to the crew, and there was English and French on board, and Norwegians, like the United Nations, and some Canadians. The wildest operator was about 18. He was from Toronto, I think. So anyway, after while they asked me to like to have some dinner, I said sure. And I sat down, had a meal with him, and when I was finished, I helped to wash up the dishes and so on and so forth. And I brought the kits back to the galley. And in the galley, I seen this gentleman sat down there in a brown suit of clothes, and he said, did you wash the dishes? I said, yes, sir. He said, how would you like to have a job? Oh boy, I said, this is great, you know, I just jumped for joy. I said, this is a golden opportunity. So anyway, he said, well, you'll have to get, I said, when do I start? He said, no, wait a minute. He said, you'll have to get permission from your parents. You'll have to get a police record, and you'll have to get your birth certificate. And I said, jeepers, I said, that's going to be hard to myself, you know, birth certificate. So anyway, the rest was very simple. But when I went down to get my birth certificate, and it showed the 17th of March, 1926, and I wanted to put it the 17th of March, 1924, make me 2 years older. So I tried to erase it, and it didn't work, and I got kind of, I said, boy, what am I going to do? I know he's going to ask for it. And so every time when I went back to the ship and go to work, I used to dodge him. The captain would come around, and when I see him come, I'd go the other way. So finally he caught me, and I said, oh, jeepers, Captain, I left at home my other trousers, sir, when I went to change and to come back to the ship. So he said, remember, I want that birth certificate. Oh, I said, don't worry, Captain, you'll get it. And so I tried to change it, alter it, and it didn't work. So I tore it up and threw it away. I said, the heck with it, I'll take my chances. We go back to the First World War. How did the troops get overseas? Their tanks, their guns, their planes, or whatever they had. It had to be carried by ship. And the only ships were available was the Merchant Marine, which is owned by various companies, shipping companies, but nevertheless they were registered with the Department of Transport or whatever government country they're registered in. They're registered with that country. And when war breaks out, they're called upon to transport all the contract and transport all the materials, war materials and food and everything else to various countries. And of course the Merchant Marine, I think the Crown has 64 shares in a vessel. So they can call upon any of those vessels at any time when war breaks out. But the crew don't have to go. But if the crew go, they volunteer to go. Unless it was like was in Britain, they were conscripted, and if they didn't go in the Merchant Navy, they were taken and put into one of the armed forces. But then very suddenly take them from the Merchant Navy to put them in the armed forces because one was just as vital as the other. And when Norway fell and the Norwegian Merchant Marine, quite a number of vessels, they went to England, and Churchill said it was great that I think he summed it up this way, that in his books, The Gathering Storms, if my memory is correct, that he would rather the Merchant Navy, the Norwegian Merchant Navy, than an army, because that was the Merchant Navy that was carrying the troops, the supplies, the ammunition, and all the rest to England to keep the sea lanes open. And well, my first ship, I was a cabin boy, or a mess boy. Well, I think making up the officers' bunks and setting the table and cleaning dishes and so on like that, and cleaning the cabins. That was my job. And when I went on the next one, the British ship, which was attached to the Manning Pool, and in the Manning Pool, they offer you 3 ships. You can refuse the first one, you can refuse the second one, but don't refuse the last one, because you don't know where she's going to, and some people have it figured out, you know, that some seamen that they go for a ship that's going to America or other places, but when they see they're going to Russia, they try to get away from it and get another ship going somewhere else. But I was a stoker. I signed on as a fireman and trimmer, I should say, and it was coal burning unit, and she had 2 boiler rooms, and there were 3 boilers in each boiler room. And so when you first went down on duty, you helped the firemen to clean the fire grates. For instance, you have a long bar, which we call a slice, and you had a rake, and you had a rake which is a hoe, you know, and then you had a shovel. And when you took the slice in, you put the fire over on one side in the fire pit, and then you took up the clinker with the slice, and you hauled all that out with the hoe, and then you shifted over the fire over on the other side, the coals that are burning, and you put a bit of coal on it, and then you do it likewise on the other side of the pit, and then you spread it out, and then you fill it up with coal. And I was so high, if I was so short, you know, I used to get the shovel and I had to keep up on my toes in order to reach the fires. This is the Dutch ship, which was on with fireman and trimmer, and signed on her in London. Well, she was in Hull, and it sent me by train then from London to Hull to join this one. Now we have, as you can see, we have a 4-inch gun, which is a submarine gun or surface gun, and up here is a 12-pounder, which is a aircraft gun. Then we have 2 35mm or 20mm guns here, Oerlikons, one on the starboard side and one on the port side. And up here on the boat deck, we have 2 guns, a port and on the starboard. And that was the one where I got injured. My wrist, or shrapnel hit my wrist when I jumped from the deck when we thought we were hit. And I jumped down to the main deck, and the blood came out in there, but I just paid no attention to it because we were more scared than anything else because we thought the ship was hit. It used to go up like a jack-in-the-box, and the blades would be out of the water, and the ship would rattle like a, you know, how would I put it, like a bunch of tin cans or something. I don't know, I suppose by providence, I suppose I'm here today. I suppose, I don't know, might have been somebody out there looking after us. But there were some people, you know, a ship right alongside you, all of a sudden you see her getting blown up, and maybe carrying ammunition and supplies, and just blown to hell, you know. And after everything's put away, you see nothing but just driftwood or parts of flotation on the water. and some of the crew would be in the water, and we'd be going on, but some of the rescue vessels, which are the trawlers, we'd be picking up the survivors, if there were any, you know. And the next, that was going up to Russia, Murmansk. And when you hit that water, you just freeze to death in a matter of seconds. You know, there was no way that you could really escape it. And other ships going to the Middle East, down to the Mediterranean and to the Red Sea and then out in the Indian Ocean to India, we had some close calls. But we were very fortunate. There was always that element of being afraid, being scared, but you learn to live with it, you know. And sometimes when you be in your bunk and you hear the depth charges dropping from the escort and everything, chasing submarines, and sometimes the submarines will lie in wait and the convoy is coming along, and they'd be underneath as the ships go over, and the escort couldn't pick up the sound from the warships or the submarine because of the noise of the compulsion of the ships passing over. So the German ship will come up in the center of the convoy, torpedo over 3 or 4 ships, and then escape. Or another way to do it is that if it's on the starboard side of a convoy, and the 3 or 4 destroyers would try to go and to kill it, or to capture him, whatever the case may be, or bomb him, or depth charge him, there'll be other U-boats on the other port side of the convoy coming in and then take out 7 or 8 ships. When we got into Murmansk and got alongside the pier after all the ships were alongside the quay, you know, discharging their cargo of ammunition, tanks, guns and planes and what have you, and food and medical supplies. And the Germans were only about 30 miles away from their base, and they come in and perpetual daylight, there'd be no dark, and they come in and bomb the docks and everything, and we move out from the docks, and then the Russians will come in and what they call, they were white Russia who refused to fight for Russia during the war, and they were all prisoners of war, and they used to get them to rebuild the docks and unload the ship. And so many times we got, you know, escaped getting any permanent damage done, or we did get the bow when we were alongside the dock. Part of the bow was hit, but not too much. And then the whole city of Murmansk, or the town, when we got allowed shore leave, 4 or 5 of us were walking up a muddy road, and we're going what we call the Arctica Hotel. And while we were in the Arctica Hotel, there were Air Force people here, Royal Air Force, and the Russian soldiers with their garrison trousers on, and you know the way the Russian army dressed, and Merchant Navy and Royal Navy, and we all got in there for a meal. But while we were there that day, the Germans came over, and the Arctica Hotel was bombed, and the people were just running like rats, you know, trying to get out of the place. And one fellow had a gas mask on, and he said it was Germans were using gas, but it wasn't at all. It was just the smoke and everything from part of the hotel that got hit. And so we went on back on board the ship, and the Russians had underground air raid shelters, and every time the air raid, they'll push people right down in the air raid shelters. They were sort of dug right out of the rocks, and so that any shrapnel. And one of our fellows, who was Estonian, when we were ashore during the raid, he was hit by shrapnel in the head and got him to hospital. And when we were leaving, about a day or 2 after, while we were at sea, we got the message that he died. He might have died a week prior to that, but they're very slow getting the message to you now that one of your shipmates been killed. And so when we got on board the ship, and we weren't allowed any more shore leave, and then we left in convoy PQ-13, QP-13, and that's when convoy PQ-17 was going. and that was the convoy that was really devastated. Out of 35 ships, only 11 reached Murmansk. They're all blown to pieces. This one here is the Fort Chancey. She's well armed too, armed merchant ship, the same as this one. And she was British. And I signed on her as fireman and trimmer. And we went to, in the convoy from Glasgow to Rock of Gibraltar. And we unloaded supplies in Gibraltar. While we were in the harbour, in the outer harbour, you could hear the corvettes going around and dropping depth charges because they were listening for submarines. And the frogmen used to get in to put bombs and sticker bombs on the bottom of the ship, and some just blown up. And this is what they were doing too, because they detected that there were frogmen in the area. And so we left Gibraltar then with some equipment then for some ports in the Middle East, and we went to Port Said. And from Port Said then down to the Suez Canal, and from the Suez Canal then to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea then across to Colombo, which is Sri Lanka now, and from Sri Lanka then to Madras, India. And I got sick, and the doctor would let me sail on the ship, and the captain wanted me to put me on deck because the ship was going up to Calcutta. And the doctor said, no, he's not fit enough to go up to Calcutta. He said, he'd have to go back to England. So they put me in a hotel and for a few days, and then I got a train ticket then right across India from Madras to Bombay. And Bombay went on board of a troop ship, the Ellis, and then up through the Suez Canal and then back and to Glasgow. And then I tried to get home. The captain said, well, if I get somebody to replace you, he said, we'll sign you off. And I knew darn well he wasn't going to get anybody to replace me going back to England. So my brother come aboard the ship, and I heard him, that Newfoundland voice, you know, and he said, is George Evans here? And one of the crewmates said, yes, he's right here. He said, washing dishes. And I was after coming off a watch. And so we hugged one another, and then he said, come on, Mom wants you home. We haven't seen you for over 4 years. I want you to come home. Dad died. And so I said, he died in 45, just before I got home. And so I said, well, I can't leave the ship. I said, I'll be up for deserter then, and, you know, fine, we'll go to jail. He said, the heck with that, come on. And some of the crew members said, well, we'll cover for you. And so I packed my sea bag and everything. I said, well, what have I got to lose? The war is nearly over, and I might as well make enough, because if I go over there, I may not get back again. So I went, and at that time, the immigration was looking for me because I deserted the ship. And then I joined I went up to the American Council. Then there was an American ship there, and they wanted a wiper on board. So I went up to the American Council, and he said, I'm sorry. He said, we don't take Canadians. I said, so you take Newfoundlanders? Oh, yes. He said, we take Newfoundlanders. So he signed me on. And I wasn't on that ship a few days when VE Day broke out. And at the time in Halifax, and 200 naval ratings were given leave, and Halifax was just in a shambles. And one of the fellas come aboard with a case of liquor. And of course I got a few drinks in, and I said, a smart guy, now I go ashore, and I went ashore, and I ended up in hospital. My wrist didn't heal, you see. It was very seldom that they had put stitches in it. But whatever had happened, I don't know if my blood or anything, but it took a long time for that to heal. But then I broke this open here a bit, and they sent me into the reformatory in Halifax. I just stood right into the stretcher, you know, they hold the stretcher up like that, and I just fell right into it. And because I had a few drinks, and I went up and seen all the damage, you know, I just wanted to see what all the excitement is about. And so anyway, next day I woke up in the infirmary, and the nuns were there, and I said, "My, where am I to? How did I get in here?" You know, I said, "I want to get back to my ship. She's sailing." She said, "I'm sorry." She said, "You can't go." She said, "You're in too bad of a condition to leave." And I said, "Oh, I got to get back to my ship." And I said, "If you don't give me clothes, I'm going to take it and go, or I'm going to walk out in my pajamas." So anyway, the sister went and got me to sign the paper, then not to be responsible for myself. So when I went down aboard the ship, I went back aft, and The skipper called me up and he said, "I'm sorry," he said, "I can't take it." And I tried to hide my hand, I was in a sling. And he said, "There's no good in hiding it, Evans." He said, I know all about it." And "How do you know that, skipper?" He said, "A priest come down." I said, "I wish he had to shut his mouth." So when after a while, got home, and I was coming out the road, on a bike, my sister's bike, and my mother and her daughter was coming in, my sister, oldest sister, and my sister said to my mother, "That's George." She said, "No, that's not George." "Yes," she said, "that's George." I would get up, she went out to hug around and kiss me. Never seen her for 4 years, over 4 years. But when I come back, there wasn't too much work in Newfoundland when the American bases started to close out and so on and so forth. And so I used to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go down and look for a job. There was no work to get, and anything, cleaning windows and painting the house or doing things like that, I took it. I never refused it. And so I got a job then with the Royal Canadian Navy as a civilian guard in St. John's. And I worked for the Royal Canadian Navy for about a couple of years, I suppose. And then I moved from, I was laid off. And then I went back to sea again. That was the only thing that was open to me. So I went on the Steward Prince, a British ship. And I joined the Steward Prince as a fireman. And used to go from St. John's to Corner Brook, and from Corner Brook to New York, and then to Halifax, and then Halifax to St. John's, and then to Corner Brook, or Port aux Basques if Corner Brook happened to be frozen in, you go to Port aux Basques. So after a while, when I got married, and I used to come home, my son didn't know me. So I said to the wife, "This is no place for me." I said, "Married man, and the kids is not knowing me." I said, I have to quit the sea. So I got a job then as construction work and as a laborer. And then I said, well, I joined another ship then. I'm getting before my story. I joined another ship and went to Corner Brook, and then I paid off at Corner Brook. And I applied for the customs in Corner Brook. And after a while, I got the job on the 22nd of July, 1948. When I joined Her Majesty's Customs, or His Majesty's Customs in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. And in 1949, I always used to say when we took Canada over, but when we joined Confederation, then we were transferred then to the Canadian Customs. And we were very, very, very happy and glad that it did take place. But the trouble was that if my memory is correct, and reading about it, that the wartime minister of the Department of Transport in Canada said that the Merchant Navy were the fourth arm of the fighting service, you see. And the same breath, he said, well, we can't recognize them and give them the same as the armed forces because they'll stay ashore and get jobs ashore, get more training, and then they'll be leaving the industry. But what happened, they sold the industry right out under their feet, They sold it to foreign flags of convenience, and therefore we had no more merchant fleet anymore, only a few on the lakes. And then we've been fighting for quite a while until the organized Merchant Navy Association, and with the help of the Royal Canadian Legion and other service, like the Royal Canadian Naval Association, and other service personnel who helped us to fight the battle. Finally, the Minister of Merrithew, Department of Veterans Affairs, Minister Merrithew, he acknowledged that yes, the Merchant Navy should be recognized for their services. I think there's a lot more to be said about the Merchant Navy